Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. So on this episode of the podcast, we continue our ongoing spotlight on student founders with a conversation with Josh Rombach. Josh is a student in our full-time MBA class of 2022, and we recently connected with him via Zoom to talk more about his background, his experience, what led him to Darden, and of course, his student venture, Piiq. If you're a wine fan, this episode is essential listening. So without further ado, here's my interview with Josh Rombach. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. How is everything going? You're on fall break, right?
I'm on fall break. It's a beautiful day here in Charlottesville. It's nice to have a little bit of downtime after Q1, and things are good.
Yeah, fall break. I say this as somebody who went to law school, and I think maybe we got a few days. Fall break at Darden Business School. Let's just put it this way: it's more than a few days long.
It certainly is. I can't help but laugh a little bit, Brett. I don't think I've had 2 weeks off in quite a while, so it's nice to have a little breather.
Yeah, and well deserved, certainly. So, what have you been up to? Obviously, I'm sure school's keeping you busy, but you've been able to do anything fun over the past few days?
Yeah, I've been trying to get out, and we're going to get out for a hike, I think, today, Brett, and trying to get out and play a little bit of golf. I think trying to, get out and enjoy Charlottesville as much as I can right now. And having moved from California, it's nice to actually have a fall season again. So trying to drink it all in.
Yeah, it is officially fall, not just because you can order a pumpkin spice latte at any number of coffee establishments, but it now, for those who are listening to the podcast, the weather doesn't come through as well on these sessions, but it is crisp. It's like 50, 60 degrees. It is officially fall.
It feels great. I love it.
All right. Well, Josh, tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what's your background?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually born here in Charlottesville, Brett. So this is a little bit of a homecoming for me. Taking a step back, family moved from Charlottesville up to New Hampshire right before I started high school. I went to college up at Middlebury in Vermont. And then funny enough, family moved back about 5 years ago. And so I'm kind of following them around here a little bit, which is great. But yeah, went to Middlebury. I was an environmental econ major there. Kind of fell in love with, I'd say, sort of food and agriculture and sustainability, I think more broadly during my time there. So maybe a little bit of a interesting path, I guess, into finance from kind of a liberal arts background. So ended up actually interning at BlackRock between my junior and senior year. Was on their private equity team and ended up actually rejoining them after graduation. So was there, I guess, for about 3.5 years. I had an awesome learning experience there. Had an opportunity to work on a handful of sort of our consumer investments while I was at BlackRock. And I think just more generally was an awesome learning opportunity for me, kind of having come from a liberal arts background, had not seen too much sort of accounting and some of the modeling, some of the more technical aspects of finance. And so it was definitely a bit of a baptism by fire there in an awesome way. But I think it was incredibly helpful for me in that I think I realized pretty early in my time at Middlebury that I was interested in sort of venture capital and private equity broadly. I think got the advice that a lot of people do, and that, kind of typically need to go through investment banking or consulting to kind of end up there. And so I was incredibly fortunate to end up on BlackRock's PE team right out of school. And I think it was a little bit of a continuation of sort of the liberal arts, I guess, of the private equity industry, and that we were doing a bit of, co-investing alongside, other private equity and venture capital firms. And then we were actually investing in the firms themselves as well. So kind of got to see everything in terms of, different stages of investing and different industries. And for me, it was a little bit of a full circle moment in that started to work on a little bit more of our consumer side, and more specifically started to work on some of the food and beverage investments, which again, kind of developed that interest early on during my time at Middlebury. And so, fast forward when I was kind of leaving BlackRock and thinking about what was going to be next, ended up getting connected with an early stage growth equity firm that focused on the consumer space, and founded by an entrepreneur, and felt like it was going to be kind of a great opportunity for me to get my hands a little bit dirtier and kind of work with some of our portfolio companies a bit, and just learn as much as I possibly could along the way. And so ended up actually moving out to California in 2017, and was there right up until, I guess, December 2020. And so I was, fortunate in that I think I learned a ton. I had some really incredible mentors along the way, and that was kind of ultimately what led me back to Darden.
Where'd you live in California?
I was up in Sonoma, up in wine country.
That seems like a pretty good place to land. A beautiful part of the world.
Oh, it was fantastic. It was great. I'm not much of a city guy, Brett, and to be in Sonoma for a few years was absolutely incredible. It was great.
Were you a wine person before you moved to Sonoma, or do you not have much choice? If you live in Sonoma, you have to become a wine person.
I think you're forced into it a little bit. Definitely not a wine person before moving out there, and so definitely was trying to learn as much as I could and kind of immerse myself in that culture. So it was a fun place to learn for sure.
Yeah, I would imagine it's probably one of the better places you can learn about wine here in the U.S. At least Virginia's got wineries. My home state of North Carolina does, but not quite on the same level as the California wineries of the world. So, well, how did you get interested in pursuing an MBA? Is it something that you had thought about for a while, or is it a relatively recent idea?
Brett, I think it was something that had always been on my radar. I think going to a liberal arts undergrad always kind of felt like that would kind of be the next step in my career, and kind of wanting to, just continue my education. Like, always knew that was something I had thought about. I would say that, when I joined Sonoma Brands, felt like I kind of had the opportunity to become a little bit more involved in some of our investments and get a little bit more operating expertise in a way that I think highlighted that, candidly, I'd spent all of my career on sort of the finance side. And so having an opportunity to get a little bit more exposure to other parts of the business, I think highlighted for me that I would kind of really benefit from, a general management program, and just getting some sort of foundational knowledge of other parts of the business. I would say I also kind of realized, having the opportunity to work with some really incredible entrepreneurs, had a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch of my own, and realized I probably wasn't going to be able to scratch that entirely on the investing side. And so felt like business school kind of not only provided that kind of very foundational, kind of broad education that, I think would benefit me as an entrepreneur, but also sort of provided some of the space and the resources and the time to pursue something more entrepreneurial, whether or not I sort of knew exactly what that looked like at the time.
Well, I want to stick with this entrepreneurial point you're making here. Is it something that you realized as you got closer to people who are actually doing this, that, running their own businesses, launched their own venture, that you realize this is something I'd like to do, this is a potential path for me? Or is it something that it had always been on your mind?
I think it's something I had always thought about as a potential path, Brett. I think I'm really not the type of person to probably I would describe myself as probably pretty risk averse, honestly, which is maybe a little bit surprising for an entrepreneur. And so it's definitely something I had considered. I think, realizing that I was going to be heading back to school helped provide, I guess, a little bit of infrastructure and a little bit of a push to actually start working on something. So it was always kind of in the back of my mind, but I wouldn't describe myself probably previously as being all that entrepreneurial on my own.
It's interesting. It's been fun to talk with students in both the full-time and the executive MBA program about their entrepreneurial journey. For some students, they arrive at Darden knowing it's exactly what they want to do and very, very much focused on that, may actually already have a venture that's operational, and they're helping to sort of take it to the next level, hoping to take it to the next level. For other students, it kind of sparks while they're here and around people, or maybe it's about access to resources, and there's no better time to explore. So it's been fun having these conversations. So Josh, so let's talk a little bit more. You get to Darden, you're here. I mean, what stood out to you about Darden as you were kind of thinking about MBA programs? What really resonated with you?
I guess there were a couple of things that I was really focused on, Brett. I mean, I think just the quality of the education here. I think it's always had a reputation for being a top-notch general management program, and that was exactly what I was looking for. I really didn't want to go to a school that was kind of had a reputation for being maybe a little bit more solely focused, and just feel like Darden kind of offers such a wide range of resources, academically and professionally, that I thought that was really going to kind of maximize my ability to explore a little bit, and kind of knowing that, at least in part, I was coming back to school to do something entrepreneurial. Wanted to make sure that there was kind of that wide range of options available. Maybe this is a more sort of personal and selfish way to think about it, Brett, but I'm not a city person, as I mentioned. Was kind of familiar with Charlottesville, and really liked the idea of coming to a place where you're really kind of focused on being in school, and love to spend time outside, and Charlottesville certainly affords that. But I think more importantly, really wanted to be in a place where I really get to know my classmates pretty well, and just felt like being in a city, I think people kind of have maybe their own kind of social networks and whatever else. And so being in a place like Charlottesville, I felt like was really going to enable me to kind of immerse myself in, the education, and, getting to know classmates and making some awesome friends, which has definitely been the case.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, certainly resonates with a lot of what we talk about as an admissions team when we connect with prospective students. Obviously, many great MBA programs in the world, but when you kind of think about the experience that you can have in Charlottesville, I think it's probably fair to say that school is more than just an academic hub for students, right? There's a social element
Absolutely.
to it as well, in that you perhaps more invested in those relationships than you would be if you took Darden and put it in a big city where people's lives really kind of largely play out independent of the school. That kind of layering, I think, has a lot of impact in terms of relationships that people form. Well, all right. So you come to Darden. You mentioned liberal arts background. You've done some things in finance. You had some exposure to entrepreneurs. So you come to Darden, and what was first year like? What's the adjustment like in that first year?
It was drinking from the fire hose, Brett, for sure. I mean, I think I came into school like realizing that it was going to be quite a bit of work. I think they kind of throw you into the deep end, and I think in hindsight, and maybe I can appreciate it a little bit more now that I'm kind of through core. It was definitely intense. I mean, I think there's a ton of reasons that I think that's a really positive thing. I think, having sort of the support of a learning team, I think was incredible. I got incredibly lucky in that I had a great group, and I think my section was part of section J. So we started a little bit later than the rest of the class. I mean, I think kind of going through that experience together was incredibly bonding, and I think you really kind of get to know people on a different level. I would say academically, I was surprised in a really positive way. I think a lot of what I had learned professionally, it was a lot more just sort of on the fly, like, here's how kind of things get done, and kind of off you go. But to be able to take a step back, even in some of the finance classes where I felt like I, would be pretty comfortable with some of the course material, like being able to take a step back and understand sort of the underlying theory for, why something gets done the way that it does, or, why something is sort of prevalent in the industry, I thought was really helpful. And so to kind of have that context, even on parts of sort of the business world that I felt pretty comfortable, was really eye-opening and really interesting. So, I mean, it definitely pushes you and stretches you, and it's fun to kind of come out on the other side of that and kind of realize how much I think, you're able to learn.
Well, we've had some of your Section J classmates here on the podcast talking about their experience. Of course, for our listeners who haven't had a chance to listen to those episodes, Section J, it's normally Section A, B, C, D, and E, but there was a one-off January section a couple years ago to kind of offer students flexibility when COVID hit, and obviously some people's timelines changed, and logistically it was perhaps a little bit more complicated for people to get here to the U.S. and to get settled to start an MBA program. The school introduced a one-off January section, and so that is the Section J. We had Elizabeth Blankenship on here from Section J talking about her startup. I imagine it's probably been
Awesome.
fun for y'all to connect given your shared entrepreneurial interests.
Oh my gosh, it's so great to have, other entrepreneurs within sort of the broader Darden community, but then you really get lucky when you have someone like Elizabeth in your section as well. So yeah, very grateful to have her as a friend and a confidant.
Well, talk to us a little bit more. You come to Darden, you in the first year, very busy, got a lot going on, but also as part of that, it sounds like you start maybe really kind of getting into your entrepreneurial path and kind of thinking about what might be next for you with a startup. So what's your idea and where did it come from?
Yeah, for sure. So I think you kind of led us down the right path here, Brett. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, I'm not a wine person. I did not kind of grow up around it. I wouldn't say family's kind of super into wine. And so, moved out to Sonoma. I guess I was 26 when I moved out there. And so much of the culture in Sonoma really kind of revolves around the wine scene. And, I think I put a pretty good faith effort into trying to, learn the subtleties and the nuances of wine. And I think I pretty quickly realized that's really probably I don't have the palate or the patience for it, Brett, if I'm being honest with myself. I guess on the flip side of that, I mean, what I was doing for our firm in part was, spending quite a bit of time talking to entrepreneurs and trying to find new investment opportunities and looking at sort of trends in the space. And one of the things that we were kind of investing behind broadly was this push towards kind of better for you, kind of across every subsector within kind of the consumer space. And so, certainly, and you've seen that sort of play out, continuing to play out in sort of the food and beverage world. But one of the things we were looking at quite a bit was kind of this push towards low and no alcohol products. So like non-alc beer, I think has really kind of become pretty prevalent in the last couple of years. And so, I'm in Sonoma, wanting to sort of participate in sort of that wine culture, but you look at the product itself and how it's marketed and even like how it's served, right? Like you can only really buy for the most part the big sort of 750 ml bottles of wine, and felt like it really just hadn't innovated in the same way that other sort of categories within consumer have. And so, I think it was, part sort of personal experience and wanting to find something that was, a bit healthier and just sort of marketed in a more modern way. And, simultaneously seeing that data in terms of, how have the other, categories within alcohol, even how have they evolved. And so it was definitely something that was eating at me for quite a bit. I was fortunate to have a really good friend who was in the winemaking space in Sonoma. And he came across this concept called Piiq, which is kind of the, the underlying method of winemaking that we're utilizing. And so, Brad, I mean, Piiq is essentially, you think about traditional winemaking, right? Where you crush grapes, that juice goes off and becomes delicious wine. But for the most part, the sort of leftover solids, the grape skins and sort of whatever else, I mean, that stuff for the most part is probably heading to a landfill or back into the the vineyards in some cases. Piiq, we actually take that solid material and we rehydrate it. So we add water back to it. And what it makes is sort of a naturally occurring low alcohol kind of wine spritzer. And someone described it recently as like the rebooted wine cooler, which is probably the perfect way to describe it. So I guess the industry is kind of coming full circle at this point. But it was funny, Brett. I mean, came across the product, was fortunate to kind of try a couple different products. Interestingly, they're one of the sort of the pretty bigger producers is in upstate New York. So had a couple different versions of Piiq and realized that was totally the answer to exactly what I was looking for. Like this is a way to kind of participate in wine. It was sustainably made, just given that it was upcycled, lighter, lower alcohol, and felt like there was an opportunity to kind of refresh that. And it's certainly not a new concept. It's been around since ancient Rome, but to kind of take something ancient and kind of bring it back to life in a refreshed form was super exciting to me. And so probably cliche, but one of these things that, ate at me for probably a couple of years before we actually started going down the path to produce it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that this concept, this approach has been around since ancient Rome. I have never heard of it before. And I say that as someone who spent 6 Christmas seasons working in a wine shop in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was all, it's all bottles of wine. We had a wine bar there, but you're right that there's not been a whole lot of innovation in terms of, well, packaging. It's still pretty much the bottle. The big controversy when I was working in that wine shop was shifting from corked bottles to screw top. And this was like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Is this going to work? Because, people can be a little traditional, a little purist about this. So is that something, have people actually heard of this? Are you oftentimes introducing this to people for the first time?
I'd say for the most part, we're introducing people for the first time. I'd say the kind of natural wine community, I think is, and I say this very endearingly, it's kind of the wine nerd crowd, and which is awesome. But kind of taking this concept that I think is, it's been around for a long time, but most people really don't know what it is. I think we're really trying to introduce something pretty new to folks. And so that's certainly been a fun and challenging part of, launching the business is like, hey, this is something new. How do we talk about this? How do we explain it? And I think it's always interesting when there's kind of an education component to a new product. But, to your point, Brett, certainly kind of have encountered that very sort of purist attitude around winemaking, which is great. I think it's, it definitely appeals to a lot of folks, but I think providing something that kind of takes some of the intimidation factor out of wine and is a little bit more approachable and kind of designed for a little bit of an easier drinking experience, I think is also attractive.
Yeah, I was going to ask about competition because, I can remember where I was the first time I saw a hard seltzer. I was sitting at a Red Sox game and with my dad, and, they walk around with trays of stuff that you can buy, beer or whatever, and they had White Claw, and I was like, I don't know, hard seltzer, is that going to work? And of course, I'm way wrong about that. It's a huge enormous industry, and there's so much competition now. I was just in the grocery store not so long ago. Topo Chico has its own hard seltzer. It feels like if you're in the seltzer game and you don't have a hard version, like what, you better get on it. So it feels like there's a lot of competition for dollars, but maybe there's just a lot of dollars and in this particular industry.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like I mentioned earlier, Brett, some of the numbers. You think about beer over the last few years, really primarily has been driven by this hard seltzer craze. Spirits has really been driven by sort of this push towards like the ready to drink cocktails that I'm sure a lot of people have encountered. But then you think about wine, and it's like the really only piece of innovation I think that's kind of happened in the space is canned wine. Marginal, I would say at best in terms of something innovative, but it's fun to see some of these trends, as they continue to play out. I think there's a lot of folks who are maybe a little tapped out on the seltzer craze as well and kind of looking for something else. And so certainly an area of opportunity for us.
So where are you right now with your company?
So I was doing sort of the back and forth a little bit during core, which I don't think I would recommend to folks out there to California. We were, continuing to do some of our R&D. And so landed with a product, I guess, probably late last spring with kind of a formulation that we were excited about. And so I was fortunate enough to be accepted into VPX Squared this summer. And so I was working with kind of the Darden accelerator and the awesome folks at Batten. And so we actually ended up doing our first canning run in July. And then we launched the business direct to consumer, I guess, mid-August. So the way we kind of set up the business, Brett, we're shipping direct to consumer into about 35 states right now. And I'd say the big challenge for us right now is trying to crack some retail doors here in Charlottesville. So it was definitely a fun moment to kind of see it come to life and to kind of be able to open that box and hold a can for the first time. But it's been incredibly satisfying, I think, to be able to go to classmates and kind of be able to get their support and kind of see folks, providing feedback and kind of helping with ideas and enjoying the product. So definitely still quite a bit of work to do just in terms of figuring out some of the distribution pieces. And it's definitely an interesting time to be launching an alcohol brand, especially direct to consumer, in light of sort of the pandemic and some of the challenges just around supply chain and all the rest of it. But it's definitely been an incredible learning opportunity. So
it's a regulated industry. There's ABC and all this kind of stuff. That adds another layer of complexity, I would imagine, if you're trying to launch a product, and it's probably got to go through a few more channels.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I think that's definitely something where we're still getting up the learning curve every day here, Brett. It's really interesting. I mean, wine is kind of treated differently than other industries within alcohol. Every state has its own sort of regulatory and compliance needs, and to be shipping direct consumer, and then to direct to consumer being one channel, and then sort of retail being another. Also have pretty different requirements in terms of making sure that you're staying in compliant. And it is certainly not one of those things. I mean, you really need to be as compliant as you possibly can from day one. So trying to figure that stuff on the fly, while doing, product development and stuff, it was certainly a challenge, and one we're certainly continuing to navigate.
Yeah, it was one of these things that came up in our conversation about kombucha, which is Jingshu. It's it's coffee kombucha, but because kombucha has an alcohol component to it, low, but nevertheless an alcohol component. Some of the regulatory stuff that she was having to work through to get it into retail stores, maybe not initially anticipated, but was adding some overhead and a little bit of a delay, I think, to some of her efforts.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. And I think there's quite a bit of gray area, especially I think if you're doing something innovative, like I think Jing is doing. I mean, you really kind of have to carve out your own path and make sure you're kind of checking in with the right regulatory bodies and, making sure that the retailer and the customer ultimately are kind of comfortable with sort of what you're saying. But I think that's usually probably a good sign if you're having to figure out something like that for the first time. Probably a nice competitive advantage in some ways.
Yeah, it at least suggests that you're close to going to market, right? You're now kind of moved beyond this sort of testing it in kind of maybe a more limited way, and now you're ready to go meet more consumers and kind of be out there in maybe a little bit of a broader way. And so,
totally.
One of the things that I'm curious about is on the packaging front. This is something that has come up for different beverages, particularly those that are packaged in aluminum. There's been shortages of aluminum periodically, and I know it certainly had some implications for some of the hard seltzers and their distribution. Is this something that you that you've encountered?
Yes, we kind of encountered similar issues, I'd say, with pretty much every aspect of production, to be totally honest, Brad. I mean, everything from labels to the cans themselves, to even like we have a little kind of snap top 4-pack, which is kind of how our product is shipped. Really every piece of it, I would say we encountered kind of supply chain issues due to COVID. And so definitely a little bit of a trial by fire there in terms of trying to figure out how to navigate all that and like being able to procure what you need in the first place. But definitely hit some delays along the way. So definitely some lessons learned, probably the hard way in our first production run.
Well, as you noted, it's an uncommon time to be trying to do really anything, let alone ship wine around the country. And of course, the supply chain issues, which we hear about on the news or read in the paper. If you are in the shipping business, right now. You're probably experiencing that firsthand. Do you just kind of say, hey, this is what it's like to do business right now? There's only so much I can do.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably a nice proxy for entrepreneurship as a whole. I mean, there's going to be things that pop up inevitably that aren't going to go your way, and certainly, you get lucky breaks as well. But just trying to figure out sort of the best path forward in light of kind of constantly changing environment and situation. So I guess grateful in some respects to have had to navigate probably a more difficult situation than what I hope we would encounter as a more steady state. So pretty much everything that could go wrong probably did go wrong on our first production run. So nice to have some scars, I guess, in some ways.
As someone who listens to how I built this, that sounds right to the entrepreneurial journey, or like you get into it and maybe you haven't fully thought through. I mean, like it's all part of there's just stuff that comes up and you just have to keep moving forward. It feels very real.
Yes, absolutely. That's well put.
So you mentioned VPX Squared, and we've had Jason Brewster on here to talk about all the great resources in the network of people that are available to students through the Batten Institute. We've also had, it should be noted, David Tuvey, MJ
Awesome.
Toms, Robin Swift. I mean, the incredible group of people at Batten, and of course Sean Carr. Have you continued to stay engaged with the Batten Institute as you kind of started to ship and gone through this initial production run? Have you continued to leverage the resources here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Being part of VPX Squared this summer, I think provided some really, really helpful infrastructure for us and just some accountability. So was in a cohort with Jing and Elizabeth, which was great, kind of all working on consumer products in some form or another. And so to kind of have the infrastructure that VPX Squared and sort of the Batten Institute more broadly provided was amazing, and enabled me to kind of focus on that full time this summer. I would say it definitely kind of extends even beyond, I think, probably what I would have expected. I think the network of mentors I think that Batten has, and sort of their ability to kind of maintain these connections with alums, I mean, it was just really, really powerful for us. And so being able to kind of have all those folks in your corner and be like, hey, here's kind of the issue that I'm dealing with today, or do you have any ideas on X, Y, and Z? I mean, they've just been incredibly helpful. So I definitely do my best to kind of keep them all involved and kind of up to speed. And it's nice to kind of have those folks where you can really be honest and like, hey, here's kind of what I'm struggling with, and to have them be able to tap into their networks and provide support has really been a total game changer for us.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the network of people, because one of the things that Jing has talked about, and Elizabeth, and oh gosh, I feel like a lot of the female founders that we've had here on the podcast, there's quite a few of them. They've all talked about this network, really kind of through the KPI club that was started. And I was wondering about network of other student founders. It feels like there's some real energy around entrepreneurship right now at Darden amongst the students, and that there's quite a few people who have ideas, and they're trying to kind of grow and build those things, take them to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in large part due to the work that Batten does, and I think some of that is more more formal programs like VPX Squared. Some of it is less formal, like we had sort of these weekly founder get-togethers over the summer, and the whole Batten crew would kind of be there. I think there's really just some great interconnectivity between the different resources that the school provides. So I mean, I would be remiss not to kind of give a shout out and a thank you to kind of Jason and Mary Andrews from this summer, and MG Toms was an early taste tester for us. So very brave of her to volunteer herself for that role. And then Damon DeVito as well, who runs Venture Velocity class. I'd say, yeah, I think they've really done an incredible job of sort of fostering this culture of support. Like there's definitely not a kind of competitive air to it. And I think there's, obviously a tremendous amount of resources to kind of go around, but kind of fostering this culture of, we're kind of all in this together. And for the most part, I think we're all really encountering the same kind of highs and lows that are inherent in entrepreneurship, and definitely creating sort of this openness. And so it's amazing to be able to pick up the phone and text, if I'm texting Jing at night, it's like, hey, this is a stressful day. Like, here's what I've got going on. And she's like, hey, I've got something similar going on. And you can kind of help kind of pull each other through it, which is just an incredible, it's a great support system to have. And it definitely kind of keeps you going. And I think it definitely makes it a lot more fun. So kudos to the Batten team and to Damon for all the work that they do to kind of help facilitate that.
Well, what's next for your venture? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, Brett, I mean, I'd say we're really kind of thinking about using the time I've got left here to kind of continue to prove out the concept. So I'd say the big thing for us right now, we're looking to sort out sort of our distribution situation. There's definitely a handful of accounts here in Charlottesville that we'd love to get some product in and just kind of get a better understanding of whether the consumer is as excited as we are about what we're building, and so definitely kind of leaning into the next few months and through the spring as a test, and continuing to just move the ball forward and kind of in small ways to continue to de-risk and kind of understand kind of what we have here. So it's an exciting spot to be, and looking forward to seeing where the next few months takes us.
And if somebody wants to learn more, just to make sure we have all the details here, what's the name of the company and where do they go to learn more?
So the name of the company is Piiq Paquette Wine Seltzers. You can check us out online at drinkpiiq.com. It's Piiq. And they can also check us out on Instagram at drinkpiiq.
All right, and last question, a little bit of a riff on our typical last question, which is a piece of advice for prospective students. I wonder if there's something you've learned along your entrepreneurial journey that you would share as a lesson, a piece of advice with our listeners who may be similarly inclined, thinking about launching their own venture.
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple of things, Brett, and I'd say I'm definitely still working to kind of internalize this advice myself, but I had a great conversation with Damon DeVito pretty early on in my time at school, and I think he really kind of helped frame the opportunity that folks have here at Darden in terms of really just kind of going for it. I think being able to kind of do a little bit of an inventory on sort of your fears and kind of understanding how you can kind of de-risk that, and certainly kind of fits into the broader, effectuation framework that I think we talk a lot about here at Darden. But, I think really just kind of going for it. I think that's definitely been a little bit of a mantra, I guess, for me, in light of sort of all the challenges that we face, just continuing to kind of push forward and kind of go for it in each kind of stage of the business. I think the other thing I would mention, Damon DeVito, as you might know, is a very good golfer. And he kind of has this adage of just letting your next shot be your best shot. And I think that's something that I continue to kind of grapple with. I think it's easy to kind of get hung up on, something kind of not quite going right, but continuing to move forward and, thinking about how you can kind of make the next action that you take, how do you kind of learn from some of the sort of past mistakes and kind of benefit from it. So that's definitely something that I think quite a bit about, and something I wish I had kind of thought about maybe earlier in this entrepreneurial journey.
That windshield mentality, I guess, is what people talk about. Just what's ahead, not what's behind.
That.
The whole point about it, Damon, and Damon's advice to go for it really does resonate with that conversation that we had with Elizabeth about her business Coton. And I think he gave her the advice of like, well, what makes you most scared? What makes you most afraid? Or, what do you think is the hardest thing when you think about this particular venture idea? Mm-hmm. And she said, well, I think it's sourcing. Where is it going to work out to be able to get these materials? He said, well, go do that first. Actually go run towards that. Do the hardest thing first. And it worked out. And, she is where she is now, really kind of to help me take her venture to the next level. And that was really fascinating advice. I think a lot of people would think like, I'm going to start off and build some momentum and maybe do a few easy things. And it was maybe a little bit counter to that. In fact, a lot counter to that.
Absolutely. That definitely sounds like a Damonism, and definitely one that's incredibly helpful and kind of understanding the right path forward.
Well, Josh, it's been such a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for coming on the podcast to talk more about Piiq. I'm glad things are going well. It sounds like you're building up some momentum and lots to look forward to.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate it.
And that was my interview with Josh Rombach, a student in our full-time MBA class of 2022. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.